In the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho, life pretty much revolved around the University of Idaho. It was the kind of place where students felt entirely safe planning their futures. But that sense of security changed forever on November 13th, 2022. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into how a devastating tragedy in a tight-knit community launched one of the most meticulous, multi-agency criminal investigations in recent U.S. history. We're going to look at the facts of the case, the incredible forensic work that ultimately led to an arrest, and most importantly, the 4 bright lives at the center of it all.
Here's exactly how we're going to break things down today. First, 4 lives, 1 town. Second, a community seeks answers. Third, the digital trail. Fourth, identification and arrest. And finally, Section 5, legacy of the victims. Let's start with Part 1, 4 lives, 1 town. As we just mentioned, Moscow, Idaho was a welcoming, incredibly tight-knit community where serious crime was practically unheard of. It really was an idyllic place to be a college student.
Now, it is absolutely crucial we remember exactly who was lost here. Because before they were known nationwide because of a tragedy, they were simply young adults looking forward to the future. Kaylee Goncalves was energetic, super excited about beginning a new career after graduation. Madison Mogen, who often went by Maddie, was known for her incredible kindness and really deep friendships. Xana Kernodle was outgoing and fiercely caring, and Chapin was remembered by everyone for his positive attitude and an incredibly close bond with his family, especially his siblings.
The weekend started off completely normal. On the evening of November 12th, the 4 friends were out socializing separately, doing ordinary college activities. By the early hours of November 13th, they had all returned to their off-campus home on King Road. 2 additional roommates were also inside the home sleeping, and nothing appeared unusual. But during those pre-dawn hours, an intruder entered. By the time morning arrived and emergency responders were called to the scene, the entire trajectory of this community had changed forever.
That brings us to Part 2, a community seeks answers. Because as the news broke that morning, the initial shock on campus almost immediately gave way to intense fear and uncertainty. The law enforcement response was massive. The Moscow Police Department was very quickly joined by the Idaho State Police and the FBI. They locked down the King Road residence, photographed literally every single room, collected biological evidence, and began conducting hundreds of witness interviews. But here's the thing you really have to keep in mind. Unlike the television dramas we all watch, real forensic work is agonizingly slow. It requires incredibly strict procedures so that every single piece of evidence collected can withstand the intense scrutiny of a courtroom.
And while police were working methodically and quietly behind the scenes, social media just exploded. Misinformation spread like wildfire. We saw internet users wrongly identifying totally innocent people. Investigators actually had to repeatedly urge the public to stop, warning that rampant online speculation was not only interfering with the investigation, but it was actively compounding the unimaginable grief of the victims' families.
So to push through all that digital noise, investigators had to rely on concrete, irrefutable data. This takes us to Part 3, the digital trail. Modern criminal investigations rarely rely on just a single smoking gun. Detectives had to balance physical evidence, like biological DNA found on a knife sheath left right at the crime scene, with digital evidence like cell phone location data and hours of neighborhood surveillance footage. Think of it like 2 pillars. By cross-referencing these physical and digital elements from many independent sources, investigators started building a virtually airtight timeline. Let's look at how these steps actually played out. First, investigators tracked a white Hyundai Elantra on surveillance cameras near the house during the early morning hours. When they publicly asked for info on similar vehicles, thousands of tips flooded in from across the country. Second, they analyzed digital footprints and cell phone records to track movement patterns. Third, through intense laboratory analysis, they matched the DNA recovered from the knife sheath. All of these overlapping clues eventually pointed to one person, Brian Koberger, a doctoral student studying criminology at Washington State University in nearby Pullman, Washington.
Which leads us to Part 4, identification and arrest. Knowing who you're looking for is one thing, but detectives had to gather absolutely crucial evidence before making their final move.
This timeline right here shows exactly how much patience was required from everyone involved. Following the tragic discovery on November 13th, police methodically gathered their data, eventually making that massive public appeal for the white Hyundai Elantra. After sifting through the huge influx of tips and painstakingly checking the evidence, the active manhunt phase finally reached its critical conclusion in late 2022 with the suspect's arrest.
Rather than rushing in, authorities wanted to ensure the strongest possible case. They compared that neighborhood surveillance footage of the vehicle with cell phone records and witness statements. They took the laboratory analysis of the DNA from the knife sheath and integrated it with all the other collected data. It was this continuous verification of multiple, independent sources that allowed investigators to present such a robust body of evidence leading up to the arrest.
With the suspect finally in custody, the initial terrifying nationwide search phase reached a turning point. The massive, looming question of who was answered not by a single lucky break, but by the sheer weight of cell records, DNA analysis, and surveillance footage, all pointing to the exact same conclusion.
Finally, we reach Part 5, Legacy of the Victims. Because even with the suspect firmly in custody, a community doesn't just instantly heal. They were left to grapple with the profound aftermath.
And honestly, haunting questions remain. Why these 4 students? Why that particular house on King Road? Why that specific night? The sheer randomness of it all left the community desperately searching for understanding. For a lot of people, this lingering unknown is still one of the most painful aspects of the entire tragedy.
Looking back, a few major takeaways really emerged from this case. First, it showed the incredible, undeniable power of multi-agency cooperation. Local police, state police, and the FBI working relentlessly as one unit. It also proved the critical role of modern forensic science in piecing together incredibly complex puzzles. But perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that healing is a community effort. It takes time, immense compassion, and shared resilience.
Ultimately, the most responsible way to view this story and the best way to honor this community is to remember Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. We really must honor the tremendous potential they held, the deep love they left behind, and the families who fully expected to watch them graduate and build long, beautiful lives. So, I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider. In our modern era of instant information, true crime fascination, and endless online speculation, how do we protect the humanity and the legacy of those lost? How do we ensure we actually remember the victims rather than just fixating on the crime itself? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking the hard questions, and I'll see you next time.